Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. I hope and trust that you are all well. Before I get started, I'd like to give a very special shout out to the reform members of Back to Ashes: Tavia S., Tina Mead, Cindy Cleveland, Patty's niece, Samantha Place, and Inner Scare Wifey. The rest will be listed right here on the screen. Thank you all so much for being a part of the membership. Two quick announcements. I took a poll over on the community tab, one of which was asking, what are your favorite genres of these stories that I read, so I can focus more on those stories to bring to this channel. And as of right now, the majority is camping, middle of nowhere, paranormal encounters, and let's not meet. If that is not up to your par, please head over to the community tab and cast your vote. Also, I took a poll asking if you hear me taking a breath during the narration, if it would bother you, or if you would prefer me to edit out the breaths to make it smoother. If you would like to cast your vote, please head over to the community tab. As of right now, everyone is in favor of hearing me take breaths because it won't bother them. There are times you hear me read to the point that I read until I'm out of breath. I'll pause and then take a huge breath and continue reading because some of these authors create these run-on sentences and I'm trying to read it as normal as possible. So head on over there and cast your vote. Or you could simply just make a comment down below and let me know how you feel about the breathing. Thank you. For this video, there will be no breaths until I get a final tally. I'd like to wish all of you that celebrate a happy Independence Day weekend, and I hope you are all having fun. Matter of factly, the very first story in this video will be a 4th of July ghost story. With that being said, it is time to go back to ashes. For when we arise from the ashes, we are a bigger, brighter, stronger, and happier person in the morning. Sit back, relax, kick back, grab a snack, or tuck in to get warm, and prepare for this dose of vocal melatonin entitled True Paranormal Encounters. Right after this intro, an ad will play. I'll read the first story, an ad will play, and after that there will be no more ads within this video. Quick reminder to all the newbies that happen to find my channel, welcome. I tend to read all the short stories first and then go into long form. That way it can get you kind of used to my voice as you drift off to sleep, and while you're sleeping, I will be telling the long stories to keep you asleep. Warning, if you so happen to hear big booms in the background while I'm narrating, I do apologize. People in my neighborhood are already celebrating early and shooting off fireworks. Let's get started, shall we? It was the 4th of July, and me, my mom, my dad, and my brother Evan all decided to go to my mom's friend's house. When we got there, one of Evan's friends named Gage told us that their house was haunted. I kind of believed it, but I didn't want to take the risks of it not being haunted. We went upstairs to investigate while our parents were outside watching the fireworks. All of a sudden, the light started flickering, and there was no one behind me. I quickly went upstairs, terrified, with all of the others. Gage told us that a guy named Ron died in the house back then. He also told that there was some strange activity in the bathroom, so I turned around to face the other kids in the hallway. No one was in the bathroom, and my shirt got pulled 3 times. I ran out of the bathroom and stood in the hallway kind of scared. Then Gage told us more about the ghost and that Ron died in his sister's room. We all went in there and you can feel a sick feeling inside you. I sat on the bed while my brother and his friend Gage went in the closet. Once they sat in the closet and we all heard talking. I asked them if they were talking in there, but they weren't. They came out of the closet and Gage told us to look through the TV. We saw a black shadow walking back and forth. I didn't care and I just ran out of the room like someone was chasing me. They came running down next, but Evan got stuck in the covers. Our family called us to do the fireworks outside, but when I looked at the window, I saw a man's face. It wasn't any of our family members because they were all outside. I called the other kids to come and look, and they saw it, but when I turned around, it wasn't there. Was this the ghost that was haunting the house? When I was 14 or 15, I lived with my dad and his friend. His friend had a daughter who lived with him and had the same name as me. I was supposed to sleep in the basement, where it was dark and creepy, as well as full of smoke from my dad being a smoker. I asked the daughter if I could share a room with her since she had a bunk bed, and she was okay with that. We became friends during this time, and one night she invited her friend over for a sleepover. We were all on the bottom bunk, falling asleep, and I had my iPod on, drifting off to music. All of a sudden, I get woken up by this song that's really loud. It was Go Girl by Sierra, but sounded eerie at the time. I pull the headphones off and look down to turn the song off. When I finally look up, I see a glow of light coming from the window, similar to the moon shining in, and her friend standing there staring at me while waving. She was wearing the same thing as her friend, but the shirt was a different color. I asked her what she was doing, but no response, just waving and smiling at me. So, I go to wake up my roommate, who I thought was sleeping next to me, and when I look down, I notice it's her friend. That freaked me out so much that I woke both of them up abruptly and told them what happened. We were all now freaked out and told our dads, but they said we were just imagining it and to go back to bed. I've had some weird experiences before I can't explain, but that one scared me the most at the time. I've never seen a ghost of someone living before. Every night I go for a walk around 12 to 1 a.m. in the woods behind my house. I've been doing this for 2 years, and it really helps relax me and get some sleep after I return home from my walk. I love it because it's relaxing, quiet, no one is around, and I can just enjoy nature and let go of any stress I may have. However, lately something weird has been happening. There is a small pond on the trail I take where I sit down on an old fallen log and usually smoke here. The last 3 nights after I have finished my cigarette, I've noticed a sweet, fruity perfume sort of scent. I don't know how to describe it since I've never smelt it before, but sweet and fruity is the best way I can describe it. The first night I thought it was strange and didn't pay attention to it. The second night I smelled it again, and although I thought it was weird, I thought maybe it was flowers or something I was smelling, so I brushed it off. Then, tonight, I smelled it again. I'm not sure what it is, but I actually enjoy the scent and it kind of calms me down. I'm not sure what I'm smelling or why. I've smelled it 3 nights in a row, but smelling it so often is making me wonder what the hell it is. I've taken the same trail for 2 years straight, and have never smelt this smell before. I mentioned this to a few friends of mine, and some of them said it could be a relative visiting me, but I have never smelt this before and don't really believe much in the paranormal, so I'm not sure what this is. What do you think I could be smelling? Coming to you all as I have very little explanation behind this, and the closest thing attached to it would be the paranormal, or maybe witchcraft. I every now and then will out of nowhere have cuts formed on my arm out of absolutely nowhere, and there has been a couple of times where I legitimately watched them form. These aren't bloody at all, but a couple of times has been close to forming it. These aren't long cuts, maybe the size of the average ear. I really don't know why I have had this happen. I don't really have any suggestions for how these happen, but no, they aren't me accidentally rolling over in my sleep. I'm usually awake and my arms are rested, and would have been the whole time. The first time I've had this happen to me goes back to when I was around 9 or 10, I'm not sure. I had woken to a large cut from my chest to my belly button. I remember being extremely confused, and even showed some teachers from my formal primary school. Of course, they were alerted, as they would be. But for years after, I've had this happen to me many other times. Again, I don't know how this is happening to me. Also to add, I have had these also form on my calves near my belly after that one time. And no, my family is functional and not a part of any weird cult or paganism. Do you all have any idea what in the world I'm going through? Hello everyone. The story that's about to be told occurred while I was 2 years old in my family's first house on Long Island. My father would always tell me this story as I grew up, and it has forever stuck with me as my first experience with a paranormal sign. It was during Christmas time during the year 1998 when I was playing in the basement with my older brother, who was 5 years old at the time. We were messing around with a Mickey Mouse toy that crawled when the on-off switch was toggled on. When this toy is turned on, it shouts, "Hello," in a Mickey Mouse tone, and "Goodbye" when it is turned off. Dinner was ready, and my father came into the basement to inform us. He picked and carried me up the stairs as my brother followed us. As we were walking up the stairs, the Mickey Mouse toy "Goodbye" tone sounded, and we stopped midway up the stairs to look at each other. My father questioned my older brother, asked if he turned off the toy before leaving it, and he claimed he did not touch it at all. Neither me nor my brother turned off the Mickey Mouse toy, and my dad continued up the stairs to get me settled in my high chair to start eating. During dinner, my dad received a call from my grandpa announcing the death of his sister and my dad's aunt. He hung up the phone and told us the news. My dad sat back down at the table, and after a few bites, he decided to check the battery pack of the Mickey Mouse toy that was abandoned by my brother and I in the basement earlier. He crept back down the steps, approached the toy, and ripped the Velcro back. He glanced at the battery switch. The switch was still toggled on. My dad instantly felt a rush of goosebumps. To this day, I genuinely believe my great aunt sent us a message through our Mickey Mouse crawling toy about her passing. Hey guys, so I'm going to tell y'all a story that happened about 20 years ago. I was visiting my mother in Texas over the summer, and I had to sleep in the living room. Sometimes my little brothers would come in, and we'd all sleep on the floor and just shoot the shit. You know, joke around and prank each other as one is sleeping. My aunt at the time was fighting breast cancer, and she chose to go home and pass there rather than in a hospital. so we were all kind of waiting for that to happen. One night, me, Trey, and Javon are all in the living room and Trey is sleeping. It's like 1 or 2 a.m. and I hear heavy breathing in the room, and I look up to see if someone is in the doorway leading to the kitchen, and nobody is there. I asked Javon if he heard it, and he said yeah. Then we both got really quiet again, and again it happened. Almost like someone taking deep breaths right next to us. I go down to where Trey was sleeping and I cover his mouth slightly and tell Javon to hold his breath, and I can still hear it. All of a sudden it stopped, so I took the time to get up and walk to the kitchen to see if my mom's boyfriend was there, but their door was closed. Not even 5 minutes later, the phone rang, and it was my aunt's husband telling my mom that she passed away a few moments ago. To this day, I think she came by to see everyone before she went. Shit still makes me a bit spooked up whenever I think about it. Growing up, I was never really close to my grandmother. My dad would make me and my 2 brothers call her during Christmas, Mother's Day, and her birthday. You know, the usual stuff. With that being said, I never really knew much about my grandmother. When I was about 18, she passed away. My family and I drove to her town to attend her funeral, which was a 10-hour drive. We decided to stay in her apartment since there would be no one there and we would have to sort through her stuff anyways. One of the nights staying in my grandmother's apartment, I had an awful experience sleeping. I woke up in the middle of the night with a strange white figure glowing next to my bed. I felt as if the figure was pulling the air out of my lungs and I could not breathe. There was an extremely high-pitched screeching in my ears. It felt as if the presence was trying to take out my soul. I never told anyone about this experience because I felt no one would believe me and that people may judge me. Fast forward to about 5 years later, I was having dinner at my house with my aunt, whom is that same grandmother's daughter. I turn on a ghost hunting TV show on the television, and my aunt really wasn't feeling it. She asked me why people watch this type of stuff and that it gives her the creeps. I decided now might be a good time to tell her the story about my night in my grandmother's apartment. I never told my aunt the location or when it happened, just that I woke up with a presence near my bed and that I felt it was stealing my soul. She just shook her head and told me how my grandmother used to tell her the exact same story. I don't know if it's a poltergeist or some other spirit. Sometimes I have things taken from me. No matter how hard I look, I can't find it. Several months later, I dream about the item being returned to me. Then, poof, it's in a very obvious visible spot in my room. Back when I was a student, I lost a tiger's eye necklace in school. I looked all over campus, but it was gone. When I went home, I combed my room from top to bottom. Months passed, and one day, I dreamed about a tree spirit in the middle of a garden. It told me to put my hand inside its trunk to retrieve my necklace. When I woke up, my necklace was right beside my pillow. Another time, I lost my grandfather's Swiss Army knife. He passed away several years ago. When I wasn't hiking, I always kept it safe in a drawer. Then, one day it just disappeared. I checked every nook and corner of my room. I even checked hiking bags in case I forgot to take it out. This morning, I dreamed I found it in front of my grandparents' house. When I checked, it was on the desk. I don't get it. They don't need the objects they borrow. What do they do with it? I'm pretty sure I didn't misplace it because I'm usually pretty organized. It's almost as if it vanishes and reappears for no reason. Roughly 15 to 17 years ago, when my sister and I were little kids, my sister got one of those cheap little disposable instant film cameras that are often given as prizes at Chuck E. Cheese, etc. She was taking tons of photos around the house and took one of our dog, Chewy, outside sitting directly behind the glass door. When the photo was spit out immediately after it was taken, I was shocked to find a ghostly face covering my dog. Over the years, I've researched possible explanations to explain the photo, but to this day, nothing makes total and complete sense. It was an instant disposable film camera. None of us have ever even seen that woman, and there was no other woman in our house. I'm naturally a skeptical person, but I still can't place a reasonable explanation on this photo. The camera was brand new and sealed when we got it, so there's no realistic way that anyone else's images could have gotten projected onto our photo. For all these years, we have tried to make sense of the photo and who this woman is. Her stare directly into the camera is so powerful, and her necklace is so ornate. My mom's always said that she looks like a Native American woman and points to the uneven beads on her necklace. We live in Southern California, and particularly in an area with a rich Native American history associated with the lands dating back hundreds of years, so it does make some sense. My mom always kept the tiny little photo and rarely told anyone about it because to her, it was very special. A couple of years ago, her car was broken into while hiking, and her purse was stolen, which had always contained the photo all this time. So unfortunately, we just have photos of the original. Who or what is this woman? Is there any realistic explanation for this woman stranger to appear on our instant film camera? Any and all opinions and feedback would be greatly appreciated. So, my grandma moved like a year or two ago. I remember all the strange things that happened in that house. All I heard and saw. It was truly terrifying. So I'm going to sit here and tell you some of the things that happened. Number 1, the shadow person. When we would stay at our grandma's, we would all sleep in the living room on all the couches and stuff. I hated sleeping on the chair or the cot. The chair was right next to the kitchen, and you could see down the hallway to the stairs that go upstairs. In the cot, you would be looking at the bathroom door. When I go to sleep on the chair, it was always hard for me to fall asleep, even now. And I remember feeling my dog being watched, and sometimes when I looked over down that hallway, I swear I saw someone there standing there watching me. It was truly horrifying. When I would sleep on the cot, I would look straight at the bathroom. There was something wrong with the bathroom. Again, I thought, the same watching sensation. I don't remember ever seeing someone, but I remember feeling a presence there. Number 2, the bathroom. The house was old. I knew that, but things happened in there that I could not explain. Multiple nights I would go to use the restroom and I would hear her scratching on the wall, like coming from inside the wall. Even now, I think it could have been rodents or something. One night, when I went to use the bathroom, everything was fine. But my sister had this weird face massager thingy, and when I was getting ready to leave, it turned on all by itself, and it scared the absolute daylights out of me. This one I'm still on the fence about, if this is supernatural or not. It could have been faulty batteries or something. Number 3, the feet. Okay, that sounds weird. One night I was sleeping on the couch. I stayed up when I wasn't supposed to, and when my grandma went to use the bathroom, I stayed still and tried to be quiet to not get into trouble. When she came back out, I looked under the blanket to watch her feet to see her go back to sleeping, but the feet came to me and my grandma was standing there watching me. I saw nothing else above the feet. I tried to act like I was asleep, but I kept watching and they didn't go away. It was 5 minutes before I took the blanket off my head to tell my grandma to stop being creepy. But no one was there. My grandma was in her room asleep. I don't know what it could have been. All I know was something was there and it was watching me. And those are the more serious moments, I guess, of paranormal things at my grandma's place. But I have always had this thing where I see things, and they always seem interesting when I see them. And I am scared of it, but also want to explore more of it. I have some other creepy stories at my other grandma's house if you want to hear it. But for now, does anyone have an explanation about what happened there? And why they always came to watch me? I am 28 and have lived in my home for 20 years now. My mother had experiences in this home just after purchasing it before she moved my brother and I in at ages 8 and 13. She decided not to tell us at the time, but both previous owners passed away in the home due to long-term illness. Over the years, we've experienced a multitude of different things, but in general, it was nothing too frightening as we just accepted it as the owners and chalked it up to residual energy. They took meticulous care of the home and crafted most of the elements of character out of wood by hand. As artists, they redesigned the home as their workshop, and it sufficed to say they put their hearts into every area of the space. It might be important to give some background on myself. I've long been sensitive to energies and have been able to somehow understand the why behind things before I even know the thing that happens. I am a nurse, and my ability to connect with others and catch medical emergencies prior to them occurring was always something I noticed. Not like the movies and shows, it was just a lot of good catches to not recognize that this was rather strange for a brand new nurse. Anyway, being sensitive. I've always kind of been the person who has the experiences in the home. Along with my mother, who is also very intuitive, after multiple escalating events, the bathroom sink handles both being turned on full while I was in the shower with the door locked, cabinet doors being open and shut, and hearing our names called, thinking it was a family member, when in fact, no one called out. We decided to sage the house. Things did improve, and we had very little activity for about a year. Insert global pandemic. I am working as a nurse, losing more patients than we are saving. It's trauma in a raw form, and I was incredibly drained all of the time. A lot more activity began, directed towards me specifically and not the home. Honestly, I just thought it was PTSD coming to play. I was always having visions of my dying patients in my room, hearing their pleas, feeling their hands on my arms. I ended up leaving the hospital for personal health reasons due to the stress and symptoms. I was beginning to experience the same specific cardiac illness of the majority of patients I saw, and it became a little bit too much. We continued to sage the house. I regularly tried to ground and sage myself. After leaving, things once again improved for the past year. We've had small experiences here and there that have felt like our family or past pets. In the past 4 days, there's been a very strange uptick in activity again. Every day there have been birds hitting the window. Previous owners left windows open for birds to come in and out, but it's been 20 years. There's been unwarranted hostility and arguments between family members. And today, a magnet was thrown from the fridge to where I was standing, 5 feet away. It came clean off the adhesive magnet that was still stuck to the fridge. It was pretty shocking to see. I'm wondering if this continued presence that kind of waxes and wanes could be the same entity or entities, or if there's a continuous turnover, because after saging, things do seem to improve for a while. A few days ago, I had a creepy dream. Not sure if this fits the sub, but the way I felt after this dream was highly abnormal to me. I remembered too many details of it and thought about it for the remainder of the day. To get into the meat of it, basically, what I remember of this dream was that I was something of an accomplice to a group of very twisted entities. The setting was a nice sunny day in an open flat field, something like a farm in summertime, and I was side by side with these bad people, or whatever they were. One walks into frame dragging a person who is wailing and begging for mercy. Then he turns to the person and starts to go to work torturing and disfiguring them. At this point, I haven't seen what the evil group looks like, aside from a side view of the ringleader. I look away from the tortured person, and when he's all finished, I look back. He has basically turned this person into some kind of disgusting flesh machine, and attached the person to a rigid structure. Best way I can describe it is the person was turned into something from Scorn, the video game, complete with some very graphic and sexual parts. This wasn't the only person he tortured, but I only remember one. The dream ends with the ringleader standing up straight after admiring their work, and then turning to me. It was an anthropomorphic bug or fly-looking thing, normal person size, and I felt I was looking at something purely evil. The image of its face stuck with me all day, and I can still remember it quite well. It was like a Tuscan raider, but with a biological bug face. Its mouth was like a praying mantis, and its eyes were placed like a human's, facing forward. They were still compound eyes from what I could tell. I felt disgusted and horrible when I woke up, knowing I was standing there watching all of that, and potentially helping it before I was conscious of the dream. The rest of the day I kept thinking about that sickening face and soulless stare. It stared at me until I woke up. I am what I consider a very regular man in my early 30s. I have a stable job. I am in a solid and happy relationship. I enjoy traveling, eating out, gaming, hiking, and culture. But my entire life I have experienced something which I have called life bleeding. I have really struggled to find anything similar online, so decided to put the sensation out into the open world to see if anyone else has experienced something similar. It is a very broad yet subtle sense of memory and emotion, so I apologize in advance if there's not much to go off of. Every now and then, it could be minutes apart, weeks, months, or maybe even years. I get the sensation out of nowhere that I am living another life. This life could be happening parallel to mine or in the past, but I've never had the sensation of anything happening in the future. It is also never the same life I am feeling when it happens. The feeling itself is super hazy. I am fully aware and in control of everything I am doing in the present as myself. But my mind and memories for a brief moment open up. The most similar sensation I can describe it to is déjà vu, but it's just I am experiencing something from a different place, perspective, and from a different being. That is either happening now or has happened. The events themselves are mostly mundane. It could be that someone driving somewhere, eating a meal, or having a conversation. But I have had occasions where I have experienced traumas, such as bereavement or physical harm. I want to clarify that this isn't just me thinking and imagining things. At least I don't feel I am. It always feels so distant in my mind, and it's a struggle to bring it into closer view. It's just something I've had with me for as long as I can remember, where for a second or two, my life is bleeding into someone else's and vice versa. I would love to know if anyone has experienced something similar. In May 2006, I was a resident of Gatineau, Quebec, in Canada. I had turned 17 the month prior, and 1 year of high school remained before I graduated. My parents split up in 1996. Growing up, I found it challenging to be apart from my father. My brother and I could only visit him once or twice a year due to our physical separation. My dad was given the chance to relocate to Ottawa sometime in the early 2000s. As a member of the Canadian Armed Forces, my father had little control over his career, so when this opportunity arose, he seized it without hesitation. Finally, my parents would live in the same city. My father had been seeing another woman at the time. On July 3, 2006, they were married after she followed him to Gatineau. He is a wonderful father. My brother and I have always received a lot of his love and attention. Swimming in the summer and sledding in the winter kept us constantly occupied. We both had a passion for exploration and frequently engaged in outdoor activities. Going back to May 2006, My father told us that he would be getting married the following month. They wanted a simple marriage, nothing extravagant. They chose to host the wedding in their home and invite friends and family to join them in the celebrating. I was asked by my father if I could find 2 female friends to work as servers at the wedding. Along with that, he said he would pay them for their time. I did not have a lot of female friends at the time, but I immediately thought of Liz and Lindsay, 2 girls who were also close friends with one another. When I asked them to help with this event, they graciously agreed. I prepared for the end-of-year exams as well as the special event as June drew near. June 3rd, 2006. Finally, the wedding day has arrived. I have never been one for wearing formal attire. The fabric of the clothing always made me feel hot, uneasy, and irritable. But today was about my father and his wife, not me. Though comfort is not always a given in life, but at least I look good. My brother and I got to my father's house early. We were the first ones there. Liz and Lindsay soon followed. They were dressed elegantly and had a stunning appearance from head to toe. I was pleased that they agreed to lend a hand at my father's wedding. People thought they did a fantastic job and were very happy. I was thrilled to have them present for such an important occasion. I remember feeling out of place because I was so young. I could not have any alcoholic beverages for another 11 months, and the majority of people were in their 50s or older. My parents were very strict in this regard. Before my father drank any alcohol, he drove me back to my mom's house at around 7:30 or 8 p.m. because I had school the following day. The commute was only a 5 to 7 minute drive from each home because both parents lived in Gatineau and were relatively close to one another. A few hours later, my brother had left to return home. I said my farewells for the evening and laced up my shoes. I got in the car with my dad and we started the short drive back to my mom's house. Our route took us through residential streets before merging onto Highway 148. I want to mention a few things that increase the confidence and authenticity of this sighting before I get into the juicy details of my experience. My father had been a member of the Canadian Army for 26 years at the time of this incident. He was a vehicle technician who worked on bases for the Army and the Air Force. From a tank to an engine the size of a lawnmower, he could fix it all. His involvement in peacekeeping operations abroad included the Croat-Bosniak War. Many people considered my father to be a very professional, trustworthy, honest, and situationally aware man. He is rational, analytical, and logical as well. He has a keen eye and a variety of skill sets under his belt. His mind is filled with a wealth of fascinating information. Being an artist himself, he can express his art through almost any medium. My father is a quiet and modest man who has a great deal of sincere love in his heart, not just for people, but also for nature and animals. My father and I kept going, and we were now on Highway 148. I saw my father cast a couple of quick, incredibly curious glances out of his window. After a brief moment, he shouted, "Wow, look!" and pointed to the horizon in the north. He stopped the car right away and jumped out onto the roadside shoulder. I followed suit. In utter awe and fascination, we stood next to one another. I never felt anything like it. It was a jumble of intense fear, paralysis, excitement, joy, and confusion. This should not be happening. but despite what my mind was telling me, it was. There was still plenty of light outside and the sky was clear, but two reddish-orange orbs were whirling and dancing across the sky. Although very bright, these orbs are not blinding. They moved indistinguishably according to no discernible pattern, and there were no distinguishing features that made one orb stand out from the other. Imagine having a laser pointer similar to the ones professors occasionally use in universities. This will help you visualize the incredible speed at which these objects were moving. You stand at one end of the gym and activate the laser pointer. The laser point is visible at the opposite end of the wall, but it can move instantly from one point to another with just the flick of your wrist. To be clear, I was not seeing laser pointers in the sky. Rather, these UAPs could move and stop in a pattern similar to how a laser pointer could be moved around a room. These orbs would move erratically in both short and long directions, swiftly changing from one part of the sky to another. No signs of acceleration or exhaust could be seen. In the middle of their dexterous, lightning-fast maneuvers, these orbs could also stop instantly. I do not remember how long my father and I stared at these orbs. Even though it might have only lasted a minute or so, it seemed to last much longer. Both orbs instantly vanished into thin air as quickly as a finger snap, ending the show with highly unpredictable and impossible maneuvers at light speed. I can recall at least two other cars pulling off the road to watch this happen, but none of us interacted with one another. We waited a short while after the orbs vanished before re-entering the car and making the brief drive home to my mother's house. This experience will forever be etched in my memory. It was an extraordinary encounter, which we still cannot explain to this day. For what we saw, we still do not have an explanation. One thing is certain. I am confident in what I saw, and I saw it very clearly. I never reported this incident, primarily because I was not aware that there was a way to do so for a very long time. I recently looked online to see if there had been any similar sightings in the same time period, but I was unable to locate anything. The neighborhood newspaper did not mention it either, as far as I can remember. Although it was my father's second experience, I had never encountered anything like it before. His first was in the late 1980s in Belleville, Ontario. He informed the local police of the sighting, but they did not believe him. At the time, he was still serving in the military and was employed at CFB Trenton, a base for the Canadian Air Force. I've also been subject to several strange experiences in my own life, which I still recall with excellent detail. A majority of these experiences occurred between the ages of 3 and 17. There was a period of my life when a lot of this unexplained activity spiked as well. I will continue to write about these events in separate posts. I feel a lot more comfortable sharing my experiences now, as I feel the stigma attached to the topic is slowly being dissolved. In closing, I would love to hear what you think we saw that day. Hello. We need help. My sister's room is haunted, and we have no clue what to do, how to move forward, what we're dealing with, etc. It all began in early 2021 when she, age 17 at the time, began experiencing sleep paralysis. Shortly after, the handprints began to appear on one of her walls in March of 2021. What was strange was the wall the handprint started to appear on had been covered by her furniture. Her TV stand, bookshelf, desk, and mirror. So there's no access to the walls. We did not know what to make of it and tried to move on with our lives, covering the wall back up. Events detailing 2021. We discovered new prints and stains in May of 2021. New handprints behind the mirror, August 2021. New handprints, or what appears to be a face in an entity, December 2021. At some point in the year, her desk toppled over, which was a terrifying encounter for her. She was standing in the middle of her room, away from the desk, which was secured and pushed against the wall and where the handprints had been found. It left our dogs scared to enter her room for a couple of days. Every time they went into her room, they were always shaking with fear and anxiety. Her sleep paralysis continued throughout the year to the point where she would experience it 2 to 4 times every month. She told me that she would hear a deep masculine voice speaking to her, telling her all of these negative things like how nobody can protect her and she can't get rid of it, and using her fear against her. Now, we grew up within the Catholic religion, so I would light spiritual candles in her room, do prayers, hang up crosses, and would keep a rosary on her doorknob. The rosary had to be replaced 3 times because it kept breaking. Eventually, I resorted to smudging the room and would tell my sister that mentally she has to guard herself, because the more negative energy being released in the air, the more whatever this evil entity is preying on. The year 2022 came around, and we attempted to cover up the wall even more with posters or more furniture. We found more prints and stains, March 2022. Her sleep paralysis wasn't as frequent as it was the past year. Instead of having sleep paralysis every month, it would come to her maybe every 2 to 3 months, and she was able to fight through it more. And we had finally covered her wall with a tapestry and posters and papers, although you could still see the stains and handprints poking through. In September, the sleep paralysis grew worse, and soon she was afraid to sleep again. Every time she closed her eyes, she would hear that awful voice telling her all kinds of things, like threatening her. It got to the point where she would rather go days without sleeping than be stuck fighting. We thought moving her to my room to sleep would work, but the sleep paralysis followed her there. I took matters into my hands and smudged her room for hours, blessed it with holy water, and prayed for her. She would tell me that the prayers were upsetting the voice and telling her they were pointless and for me to stop, but they brought her a sense of relief. I told her she needed to fortify her mind and stop letting whatever this evil thing was affect her so badly, because that's what it wanted. For an entire month, she was tormented by sleep paralysis almost every single night. Eventually, she found herself in a better headspace, finding solace in things like our dogs or her friends, trying to find the good in everything and not focus on what was going on in her room. Eventually, the sleep paralysis stopped in November 2022. Now it is July 2023, and the sleep paralysis has returned, and so has a new handprint at the very top of her wall above the tapestry. The tapestry has been there since 2022. Nothing has touched it. Nobody has moved it. I have uncovered it today and took photos to show you what has been going on under there for the past year. We don't know what to do. Most people might respond with a move out of the house, but we cannot. I'm afraid for her to have another experience like September of 2022. It brought her to a level of fear that nobody should go through. And it's only happening to her, nobody else. In the beginning, I thought it was because she's the easiest target out of everybody in the household. Myself, our older brother, and our mother. The easiest because 1, she's younger. 2, she would often experience negative emotions such as depression. But I do not know anymore. If any of you have any suggestions about what's going on, please let us know. I am so deathly afraid for my sister and the future ahead. For context, I have always been sensitive to the paranormal. For a long time, I thought that it was my parents' house that was haunted, then my dorm room, then my first apartment, in everyone's sense. It didn't take long for me to figure out it was something attached to me. The experiences come and go, sometimes not happening for years at a time, while other times multiple experiences happen in a week. Telling you the full story of my childhood experiences would have us here for hours, so I will be skipping to adulthood for this story. The past few years, I have had rare but significant experiences. Hearing someone walking around the school when I knew no one else could be there. There was a sign-in sheet for after hours, and I was the only name on it. I disarmed the alarm and reset it when I left. No one else in or out. Hearing furniture moving around the classroom a door down from mine. I could recall my colleague mentioning that she needed to do a desk change, but I hadn't even heard her come in. I thought it odd that she hadn't said hello as I was drawing a new chalkboard picture for Halloween on my classroom door. I wanted to go check, but I told myself I was just being silly and it was just my colleague. That is, until she walked into the school 20 minutes later. Waking up to my bed shaking violently, almost as though people were on either side of the bed, pulling the mattress back and forth. At first, I thought there may have been an explosion at a gas station down the street, or maybe an earthquake. In the morning, there was nothing on the news. My landlord hadn't felt anything, nor had my coworkers. Nothing in my room had fallen down, so I had no evidence of my frightening experience. However, things have particularly ramped up in the past few months. My mother passed away in April of 2023. A few months prior, a friend had given me the number to a psychic, and upon learning of my mom's cancer, I felt like there was nothing to lose in giving it a try, so at least something good would come of it. The things she told me and the things she knew about, I couldn't explain. Things that never could have been found on social media. While the main reason I contacted her was to ask about my mom and later communicate with her, I also decided to ask about the attachment I had. She confirmed the attachment and that it was, in fact, not human. It was a demon. She was also able to confirm that, yes, I was sensitive. That I was capable of doing the same things that she could, if I began to learn about it and practice it. I was, or am, psychic. Once my sister called to inform me of our mother's passing at 3 a.m., I became overwhelmed with a desire to see her, just to know if she was okay. It took almost 2 weeks, but she came to me. I could see her move from the foot of my bed to the head. She wasn't clear to the eye, but her voice, that was clear. Samantha. That was all she said, but it was her voice right next to my ear. Even after wanting and waiting for this, I was in disbelief. A moment passed and I called out to her quietly. She was gone. Since then, I have continued to work on remaining open to her. Unfortunately, I do not know how to remain open to only her. The demon decided it would take advantage to my openness. I have had a few small noises, lights flickering, and the ever-infuriating feeling of it clinging to my back. The last of which hasn't happened since my early 20s, 10 years ago. Today was a totally new experience. I had shared small experiences with my brother as a kid, but not with my sister, who was much older than me. She has never experienced anything before in her life, until today. I cannot express how glad I am that we have shared this experience, because I am not sure I would have believed it wasn't all in my head, though my sister is less glad. I was driving from Edmonton to Fort McMurray 4.5 hours. Often I call someone to keep me alert while driving. Just talking is enough. So I called my sister and we chatted. Her cell phone wasn't working well, so she switched to her landline. As we talked, the reception would go spotty and the call would end. Rural Alberta doesn't have the best coverage. No big deal, I would just call her back. The problem did not arise from poor coverage. It sounded as though my sister dropped the phone in a sink filled with water. Then came what I thought sounded like she was turning on the garburator in the other side of the sink. On, off, all the while the phone still being underwater. Next, the animal noises, or at least that's the closest thing I can compare it to, an angry animal. But the worst was the breathing, the raspy, labored breathing. The sounds went back and forth, but the second time the breathing started, my sister ended the call. I had tried talking to her, but I couldn't hear anything but the strange sounds. Turns out, she was doing the same thing. She heard those noises and she tried to get my attention, to no avail. She said she couldn't take it anymore after the breathing and had to hang up. This was new territory for even me, but my sister was completely terrified. We continued our call until I was almost home, and she had to pick up her sons from daycare. She is currently praying to not have any nightmares while I am typing this. My dog oddly unsettled and staring down the dark hallway. Oh yes, I forgot to mention, I'm not afraid of this thing. I've been dealing with it my entire life. I just wanted to tell the story of what has been happening. This thing doesn't have any power but to make someone feel fear. I look forward to letting it starve. I had this experience while working in 2013. I am a photographer and videographer and had landed a gig shooting behind the scenes photos of an upcoming theater production. The photos would be used as promotional materials for the premiere, which was coming up in a week. So I basically had to shoot the rehearsal, just the director, actors, and myself on the largest stage in town. It was very cool to see all of the seats empty, the director puffing away at cigarettes and swearing loudly in a place that you usually see the patrons dressed up and having a cultural experience. The play was all set in a beachside house that was built in the middle of the stage. There were several moments in the play in which all of the lights in the beach house were turned off, plunging everything into darkness, only leaving the emergency exit signs alight, pulling you out of the theater experience and reminding you that it's all a play after all. So every time this happened, I put my camera down and listened to the dialogue in the darkness. The third time this happened, the flick of the lights, the darkness, I again put my camera down and patiently started to wait for my next shot opportunity. As I stood there, I started seeing something grayish being illuminated by the emergency exit sign. All of the actors and the director were to the right of me. There weren't supposed to be anyone to my left, but I decided to turn and say hi to whoever was with me, so we could exchange silent greetings as to not disturb the performance of the actors. So I turned. What I saw has never left my mind to this day, and has made me rethink my skeptic outlook towards such things. There stood a young girl, wearing a dress. Her hands were outstretched towards me, but not in a way that you'd think she would grab me, but in a way of as if begging for something. Her palms facing up, and her fingers barely curled. Her face was full of tiredness, grief, maybe despair. Her legs were just not there, and she was very slowly moving towards me, maybe floating, I don't know. It was a very smooth and gentle movement. So you can imagine with the level of detail I recall her, I must have had eye contact with her for maybe at least 2 to 3 full seconds, which to me felt like an eternity. After the third second was when I finally managed to unfreeze myself and react. What I saw was so vivid and so there that I instinctively turned my head away and swiped with my hand in her direction, as if to protect myself from the imminent collision between us. Not letting out a peep as to not embarrass myself in front of the theater people, I lit up the monitor of my camera with shaking hands and pointed it in the direction of the girl. She was gone. I continued my work with my eyes darting everywhere and wondering what the hell just happened to me. I really wanted to speak to the theater staff about my experience, but I never did in fear of being ridiculed and potentially losing future gigs. I never made sense of this. Maybe you peeps can help. Thank you for listening to my story. Got these terrifying photos while I was exploring an abandoned theater this summer in New York. Do you think it's a ghost? I'm not here to Hollywood things. I'm going to tell you what happened exactly as it happened. So, I worked at a camp on an island on Lake Ontario in New York this summer, and I've been busy. But I just now decided to post about what happened. So, to get to the point, there was an old abandoned theater that was lost in weeds and overgrown plants. Me and some friends decided to explore it, and I have videos of us exploring the theater, but I'm not sure if I want to post them, or if people will even take interest in the story. Anyways, while exploring, a lot of strange things were happening. We went back and explored it several times, and each time we went back, something weird would happen. So instead of just telling you everything, I'm going to tell you the 3 most specific incidents. The incidents that I witnessed firsthand, and the ones that I completely believe. Incident 1. My friend Griff and I found a secret hatch to go under the stage. As soon as we opened it, the temperature dropped drastically. All that was under the hatch was an enclosed room with a ton of spiders and damp ground. See, that's not the scary part. The scary part is what we heard next, which is unfortunately nothing original. We heard footsteps, loud, distinct, and extremely clear, coming from way up above in the attic, where the bell tower was. It was a town hall converted into a theater in the 50s, and it's been abandoned since the 70s. Incident 2. While exploring the building and the actual bell tower, I don't exactly scare quite easy, I wanted to ring the bell, so I went to the crawl space and pushed my way through towards the bell. The ceiling was broken at spots and I could see the auditorium below me, but I got to a position where I could stand a bit, and I swear I've never seen anything like this. I saw a ball of light, but not like a normal just white light. It was gray in the middle, and a grayish light blue on the sides, with a ring of white light around it. I swear, it looked like it had a 3-foot diameter. It started at the bell, which was 15 feet in front of me, and it zipped right past my leg. Obviously, every single hair of mine was standing straight up. And then it zipped back towards the bell and disappeared halfway back. It happened in seconds, but I remember it like yesterday. And I wasn't the only one who saw it. One of my coworkers was right beside me and swears the same thing. Incident 3. Okay, so my friend Kim. Yeah, I don't believe her all the time. She can be a little superstitious sometimes. Kim and I visited the building. This was our last visit. In total, we visited the building maybe 5 times. We were walking around re-exploring the things we had already seen. We were there to scavenge and find old newspapers and cool stuff to take home. She kept saying that she kept seeing a dark figure. Every time she said that, I would laugh and shake it off. But she only got more serious about it. We ended up leaving because we got creeped out, and I remember her talking to me later about the shadow thing she kept seeing. I blew it off again. That is, until we started going through our pictures we had taken that day. She took 2 photos that specifically stood out. I have no idea what they are. They could be a glare of some sort, but I don't know. Guys, I analyzed this photo and I think it's that dark figure. To me, it looks like a figure coming down the stairs in the first, and the same figure somehow in the auditorium. Talk to me. What do you think we saw that day? I only very recently recalled this memory, as I forgot that it even happened to me. Prior to this incident, I had never experienced anything like it, nor did I even suffer from hallucinations. Not even after the fact. This is the only time I experienced something visual. I've had a couple audible experiences since then, but never visual and undeniably real like this. It could have been explainable, but I haven't been able to figure out how. Maybe you will. I live in Hawaii on the island of Kauai and am a 28-year-old female. Approximately 20 years ago, I was on the island of Oahu visiting family on my father's side. I stayed at my auntie's house with her rather large, height and width-wise, Samoan boyfriend. She was about 5 foot and was on the chunky side. She has a daughter, my cousin, who was the same age as me and standing at an average 8-year-old girl's height. You'll see why this information matters. They lived in this neighborhood called Wilhelmina Rise on the bottom floor of a 2-story house. It was set up almost like a fairly spacious studio, where the only room was the bathroom. Otherwise, you could see everything in the studio in its entirety, no matter where you were standing. There were 2 queen-size beds several feet from each other, one closest to the TV and the other closest to the back wall. I was sleeping in the bed furthest from the TV, on the inside, having the wall closest to me, and my cousin was sleeping next to me on the outside. My auntie and her boyfriend were, of course, sleeping in the other bed. I want to say it was somewhere between 1 a.m. and 2 a.m. when I suddenly woke up. I don't know if I had to use the bathroom or what disrupted me, but I was facing the kitchen when I opened my eyes again. Yes, everything was in one big room, so I could see the kitchen, microwave, front door, etc. from my position. So, I opened my eyes and propped myself up a bit, using my elbow to see over my peacefully slumbering cousin. I was puzzled at first as it caught my eye, and I thought, I'm just imagining things, as I began to rub my eyes and hoping to be rid of whatever was causing this potential illusion. I look up again, knowing it'd be gone because the explanation was my eyes were likely just blurry, causing me to see imaginary things, right? That's what everyone else would expect when something like this happens to someone. But that isn't what happened. Not in this universe. After rubbing the sleep from my eyes, I look up again and it's in the same spot as it had been. The next step is to pinch yourself, right? Well, that's exactly what I did. Pinch, pinch, pinch on my arm as hard as I could, to where I had to rub the pain away, as that is still there. My 8-year-old mind was trying to make sense of what was playing out, but it couldn't. And I think maybe that's why I didn't say anything to anyone until very, very recently. Standing in the kitchen and facing the sink, away from me, was what looked to be a figure of a male on the slimmer side, except I couldn't see any details of it. It was as if it were encompassed by a dark, deep, shadowy black. It was a silhouette. Not even the stove's dim overhead light penetrated anything identifiable on it. Other than this entire encounter, the odd thing is when I first saw it, my half-asleep brain recognized it as my grandma until I looked harder and made sense of where I actually was. But that didn't make sense for a lot of reasons. The main 2 being she's my mom's mom, therefore having no relation to anyone here except me, and 2, she was still alive and well on my home island at the time. She didn't pass away until about a decade later, so it wasn't some sort of omen, I don't think. After I looked at my auntie and her enormous boyfriend sleeping as they're supposed to be, I glanced at the front door thinking maybe someone broke in. From where I was, I could see the chain was still on the door, as was the heavy-duty padlock, meaning the only way that locked door's opening is from the inside. The only window in her place was still intact as well. I was quickly checking explanations off the list and not liking the conclusion I was coming to. My heart was pounding at this point, and the figure still hadn't made a single move. I rubbed my eyes and pinched myself one last time, hoping I was dreaming. Please, I thought to myself as I slowly started to lower my body onto the mattress, keeping my eyes on whatever it was that refused to go away. Please keep us safe and don't let anyone see anything. I stealthily flipped on my other side to face the wall and pulled the covers over my head. I didn't care how hot it was. I was not going to see what's on the other side of this thing, nor was I going to feel, hear anything it does. I silently prayed more to my parents' God and had so much fear and adrenaline coursing through me, I thought I would never end up falling asleep. I genuinely had it in my mind that something was about to happen to me. Miracles do happen, as after a millennia passed, I did end up falling asleep through the rest of the night without any further disturbances. I don't recall what happened the following day, but all I know is nothing was out of place. No evidence of someone MacGyvering their way into the house, and no one else mentioned anything about what I saw. I did tell my dad's mom about this recently, and she genuinely believes that I'm sensitive to something spiritual or paranormal. She has her reasons, but that's another story. For some reason, I haven't been able to find it in me to agree with her about being sensitive. Maybe it's because I fear these type of encounters, so I consciously shut this stuff out. Maybe because I'm just too skeptical. All I do know is I'd like to never experience seeing a spooky spectral stranger in the middle of the night ever again. And that, dear listeners, brings a close to these true paranormal encounters. If you are sleeping, I hope Slumberland is treating you kindly. If you are awake, I hope you've enjoyed this collection. Until next time, I'll read to you soon. Have yourself a good morning, a good afternoon, or a good night.